We can start this event that we are organizing this evening. So with the Entrepreneurship Club for Politecnico di Milano, and we are Italian Embedded. So the event is called Aperitivo with Italian Embedded. We are Lorenzo and Stefano, and we have this project. We try to build a network between Italian companies doing embedded software, or Italian people and professionals interested in the embedded software. And tonight, so we have organized this event with the Entrepreneurship Club of Politecnico di Milano, and we are so having this event that is a bit more about how you can do business with embedded software, and in particular how you can do business with hardware products. So we are in a time where it's really easy to have startups, software startups, but we also see a rise in interest in doing custom products with some hardware, and then with some intelligence on that hardware, so with software on the hardware. And for this reason, so tonight we have some guests that are Stefano Costa and Daniele Ramirez. Stefano Costa works for Blue Wind, which is an embedded consultancy company. And Daniele is the co-founder of Agade, which is a company, a startup developing an active exoskeleton to support people in different kind of physical operations. So we would like really to start with the first question, that is, how do you do business with hardware? So what's your business with hardware?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us. I'm Stefano Costa. My company is called Blue Wind. We are a consultancy. So what we do is trying to do our business by helping other companies doing hardware and software for their products. Basically, what we sell is our ability to solve problems. And when we speak about hardware problems, this is usually a little bit more problematic than software problems. Why? Because the consultancy for the design of electronic systems, when we speak about hardware, means doing the right thing potentially the first time you do it, not the second or the third time you try. And so what we sell is our ability to select the right people, the right features, the right abilities in order to solve the problems the first time and not the other times.
Thank you.
Hello to everyone. I'm Daniele. I'm the CEO and founder of Agade. Agade is a startup that develops active exoskeletons for injury prevention. So basically a wearable robot that you put on top and it reduces physical fatigue in demanding tasks. For example, we are working in the logistic field, in manufacturing field. And we work with hardware because our systems has everything from mechanics to embedded systems, sensors, and motor. So, our experience in hardware is from 360 degrees. So we see the manufacturing, the programming, and then also the industrialization things in our company. So we do everything from A to Z.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So you said, what's your relationship with hardware? One thing that usually is said about hardware is that hardware is hard, so it's not as soft as software. In what sense hardware is hard for you? What does this mean for you?
I'll try first. And hardware is hard because, as Stefano was saying, you must get it right at the first try. But obviously, we are a startup. We are young people, and we always miss the target at the first time. So we make things explode. Things don't go right at the first try, because we are young. We are doing a very, let's say, innovative thing. So this is the first thing that is hard in hardware is get the thing right at the first time. And then what is hard in hardware startup is getting money, because if without money you can do things. So investors in hardware tech and in deep tech industries are very rare in Europe. So this is a very, let's say, a very difficult part in an hardware startup is getting funding. So I mean, these two things, the technical stuff and the investors are the main difficulties I have found. Yeah, the investors.
We are lucky enough we don't invest money in building products because we are getting paid for building products. So we don't have this problem of the investment. We are lucky from this point of view. But during the years of our activity, because we are doing this since 1997, and we learned during our history of consultancy that there are 2 or 3 things very difficult when you build some hardware design, when you design some hardware product. Think of the mobile phone. You can build it, but you cannot sell the product unless this is compliant to rules dictated by legislation in countries and the rules of the business, of course. So the difficult part of the hardware is, from our point of view, safety of the product, but also compliance of the product to local rules, national rules, international rules, and also the rules of the business, which means calculating if you will get back your money after having sold the product. It's not, each time you sell one piece of the product, you will spend a lot of money, and you must get back that money. Each time you sell a license of a software product or a license of a service, you don't add any, you just add a small amount of money to your business model, your business activity. While selling hardware, each time you add up a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that actually, so putting money in advance, of course, it's one big difference between software products and hardware. And from the point of view of certifications, how do you address that, Daniele, as a startup? I mean, what's your approach for the moment? Are you still waiting for the product to get ready before certifying it?
Yeah, right now we are doing the certification for the exoskeleton, and we are working with a consultant agency regarding CE marking, because we only need CE marking to sell the exoskeleton. And but since it's the beginning, we don't have the, let's say, there are a lot of certification that we have chosen not to comply with because they are too expensive, and the design for that specific thing is too difficult for us. So in the beginning, we have taken this choice. So go for the most important and needed certification at the beginning.
What's the advice that you would give?
The problem from this point of view is that when you do something and you think of about the certification later, you will most probably have to redesign a lot of your architecture inside your product. So my personal advice would be to think first about everything. When you think about a business where selling hardware is involved, is related, you need to think about everything. You don't need to do everything, perhaps, but you need to think about every single part of the process, the business model, and the flow of the product between starting from the materia prima, raw material down to the packaged product for the market. Then you will decide not to do something, perhaps, but you have in mind that you will need to fill all single items.
No, you are very right. So we started the company 1 year and a half ago. We started the certification 1 year and a half ago. So because you are completely right on this.
So just to give an example, what kind of certifications are the most difficult to obtain? What are actually the easiest to go or to get into the market? do you have some examples to provide also about what's needed to be certified? I don't know, radiation. Yeah, I know in some fields like in the US market you need to be FCC compliant, for example. I don't know what's the most difficult for you to.
Yeah. I mean, for our product, it seems a very, very complex one, but actually the certification is very easy. You have to comply with the machinery certification. So, because we are at very low voltage with our batteries, we don't need to do very strange things. So, on our side, it's very easy. It's more on the mechanical side of things. So, make sure that the exoskeleton won't break an arm, won't break the back user, and things like that. But for us, this certification has been a very straightforward path. I mean.
Yes, basically, when you build something and you sell something, you're liable for the damage that things that you're saying that you're selling can do to persons and properties, but also you're liable for the compatibility of your product with other products in the same area. So, if you build if you build a mobile phone and when you switch on your mobile phone, the other mobile phone stop working, this is your fault, of course. If you build a mobile phone and it explodes while you're using it, this is again your fault. So this is the two kinds of certification that you must think about. And this is why we recently hired one very experienced physicist. No, engineer, yeah, working only full-time at the problem and the solution of the qualification of a product, which is very important nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think you deliver the idea of the difficulties of certifications, but actually what we wanted to say is that you read that hardware is hard, but it's also getting easier. This is something that we also discussed a bit about yesterday on our page on LinkedIn. So it's hard, but it's been harder. So from your experience, Stefano, how have you seen things getting a little bit easier? In what building hardware became easier?
The number one possibility that we have today and we didn't have years ago is the fast prototyping of the idea, which is very, very important. The possibility that you prototype your idea of a hardware product, that you can start using it well before thinking about the real one and the productable one. This is very important. We can do it today. We couldn't have done this 10 years ago. And this is thanks to the enormous amount of prototyping platforms starting from the Arduino board that enables doing the real product really usable without being really producible.
Okay. In your case, so you just wait. Oh, okay. And in your case, Daniele, are you able to take advantage of these kind of new tools? Do you really think that?
Stefano is super right. We use Arduino boards, evaluation boards every time. And also the community aspect, I think, is very important because when you are in very few people in the company, you basically use what communities have done on this hardware. So you don't have to code again to do the same things 2 times. So I think having a platform that has a strong community is very important, and also for rapid prototyping, I mean.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the relationship between rapid prototyping and professional products is sometimes, I mean, there is a bit of...
rapid prototyping using Lego bricks and the final product used to be somehow not seen as something very serious. I mean, it used to be something seen as a sort of a joking or not the real business, I mean. But then it started to be really important. Why? Because the time space between the idea and the market is shrinking dramatically. So now it is needed, simply needed.
This is a very important thing. So reducing time to market for, let's say, hardware ideas is super difficult, but you have to do it. When we got our first investment, the first exoskeleton was made out of trash and, let's say, evaluation boards jerry-rigged together in a box. So and we got our investment like that. So I think that this trend is really helping investors get their money back first, and things going to market much faster.
Yeah, these are actually, it's interesting because you always hear that prototyping boards are kind of revolutionizing the way that also external people approach the embedded world software. So you are a mechanical engineer and you can play a bit with some boards like Arduino, ESP32. But then when you are an embedded engineer and you look at those kind of boards with a bit of skepticism, but then you really understand that some companies are able to really start up and grow really thanks to this kind of evaluation boards. And since we are with the entrepreneurship club and they are of course also interested in business and money, how do you get money and the business side of this thing, how have you seen, Stefano, the business with hardware products change in the latest years? And so if you have seen some trends in business models that change in producing hardware, also influenced maybe by software and software trends.
Something that we are now understanding in the last 2 or 3 years is that hardware is pushing for more software and not the other way around. So I have 2 examples. The first one is the so-called IoT, Internet of Things. It used to be the promise of a very complex and big software platforms pushing for new hardware applications, sensors, data collectors, and a lot of different things that simply didn't happen. It didn't happen in any case. It was 10% of what was promised. The other way around, today, transportation and especially personal electrical vehicles are really pushing for a huge amount of hardware, a dramatic amount of electronics hardware, which was not expected 2 years ago, which is, on the other way, pushing for an even huger amount of software that must also be very precise and very complex and very much compliant to rules. So this is 2 examples of the evolution that can have the business, somehow unexpected, but always relying on a robust idea of hardware products, in our point of view, of course. So today, transportation is a sea of things to be done very rapidly and with a very high quality, which is not expected even by the main manufacturers, I mean.
So you're saying that electrification of vehicles is pushing
not
more,
only electrification, but also the change of the idea of the vehicle that we are now having. A change, a shifting of the paradigm between owning the vehicle to renting, using, and also lending the vehicle to someone else. This is pushing for a lot of automation, a lot of not only electrification from the engine point of view, but also everything.
Okay. And for you, I don't know if you had something to add to what Stefano said. Otherwise, I had also a question for you about your approach to choosing a business model for your hardware. If you were thinking about going out and sell your hardware, or you were thinking about something different, or to change the business model in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the IoT aspect of things is super important in, let's say, our industry, because you are putting something on people, so they don't want to feel monitored, but at the same time, you can monitor how fast they work, how is their health. So IoT is super important in this, and also this service you can provide, so software as a service, for example, monitoring and things like that, is a huge upsell for a completely hardware startup. So, I mean, and this also plays a crucial role in defining the business model, because you can sell the hardware at let's say an affordable price, and then push for added software services, for example, monitoring and cloud connectivity of the exoskeleton and all the other stuff. So I think this is a huge market opportunity in this field, in wearable robotics in general.
Okay. So in your case, you sell the exoskeleton, then you also try to retrieve as much data as you can from from its usage, and maybe also derive some services from the data and sell something on it.
Yeah, we collect a lot of data, and we use the data for, let's say, health monitoring of the user. So productivity, so plant manager want to know how fast people are doing that job, not let's say, to fire people, but to improve the whole logistic chain, the whole manufacturing chain. And and also hazard protection, for example, if someone is falling, we have the IMU, so inertial sensor on the exoskeleton. So we have all these features that we will provide to the final user.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, you start to think about when you take a dumb piece of hardware, you start adding intelligence, and then a lot of things add up to that you can really exploit, and then there is a new need for software on it.
Yeah, actually, we started with an IoT processor on the exoskeleton. So we don't have a huge processor on our things. We use a €4 processor on the exoskeleton. So we started like that because we knew that it was the future in this field.
And at the beginning, you were mentioning about the difficulties of fundraising for hardware companies. And what was your experience with that? Did you really find that some investors were not considering your product because you had hardware, and so they maybe had some thinking that it will take like years to go on the market? And so what was your impression with investors?
Yeah, investors look for software companies because they have a very fast time to market, and they can pivot. So if they see that the market is not responding well, they can change, they can do something else. With an hardware, if you have put 5 years in developing a robot, a new platform, you can just trash it away and start all over. So it's a very risky business, but in the end, things are changing, because what really changes the world today is not software, is hardware. So cars are being electric, they have software, but cars are electric. Climate tech, good luck changing world climate with software. I mean, so everything is going back to hardware, because hardware has the greatest impact, and investors are changing also their mind on this. So they are seeing their huge risk, but also huge potentiality in this market. So in deep tech and hardware. I don't know if you have the same opinion.
Yeah, for sure, doing some hardware product is more for big companies, while trying some software business is more for very small and startups. This is true. But sometimes some excellent small company or startup have the right idea, of course, and they will succeed in a little bit more time, because reaching the market with a real product is something really longer than software, for sure. The most common error that everyone, including ourselves, is doing is avoiding to do the simple calculation. So the number of pieces you sell per year multiplied by the price that someone will pay for your product must pay your bills, everything, of course. Then you can decide that this will be your investment. You give a product for free, but then you will get money from something else. You need to do the calculation. And it sounds so strange today for us to learn every day about companies not doing this simple calculation. You must do it. It's very simple.
It's simple and you have to do it. So because unless if you don't do them, investors aren't gonna give you any money because.
So you've done your calculations.
Yeah. You have to have your business model ready for the investors.
Okay. And so that was fundraising. So going to investors. What are some pitfalls, some problems of doing hardware products in Italy? Finding money in Italy for hardware products, both from the perspective of a startup and from a consultancy company.
Okay. In Italy, it's harder than in Europe to find money in deep tech startups and hardware startups because let's say the risk is very high, and I find that Italian investors are not, let's say, are quite risk adverse, so they want to put money in very industrial things. So when you have everything ready, they're going to put their money in. But if you, at the beginning, you just have a prototype, they won't give you money in Italy. So actually our investor is half French, half Italian. So this is our experience in investment. So, and now we are gathering more funds from the European Union. But I mean, our experience is that in Italy it's very, very hard to raise money in the early stages of startups, of hardware startups. So,
so you solved with an hybrid solution. Yeah. You solved with an hybrid solution, Italian, French.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's changing.
I don't totally agree, but from one special point of view, I agree that it is very difficult to get money for your idea if you want to keep your idea. But for Italian companies, nowadays it is extraordinarily easy to sell themselves to foreign companies because it's plenty of Chinese institutions, of Chinese money. There's plenty of Russian money and plenty of German money ready to buy great idea and especially great skills here in Italy. So it's not a matter of finding the money. The problem is that we will never find the money for our own idea, and in order to develop our own business, and we will find plenty of money if we decide to sell our capabilities of doing great products to some big corporation that's able to develop the business. They are able to do the calculation. I mean, this is very, very, very easy today. We have, I think, around 80% of our customers in the transportation industries are Italian, German, and English companies with the bigger stake in the capital from Chinese business people.
So you are saying that it's easier to sell consultancy than to sell a product that you develop yourself.
Sorry, it is.
It's easier to sell consultancy.
Of course, it is. Yeah, of course, it is.
Your own product.
For sure, it is very easy to sell consultancy compared to selling your product, because when you sell consultancy time, you're selling your capability to do something, and you will most naturally find the right buyer, because someone with a problem will come to you. When having an idea about a product and the hardware product, you need to be sure that there is someone exists that wants your product, which is totally different problem.
So how do you see that? I mean, it's not a good news for. No, I mean, sorry. Of course, they have a great product. I think that has a very specific market need.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, when you are just starting up and you have let's say a robot made of trash aluminum and boards put in a box, I mean, it's super difficult to find someone Italian that is going, let's say, I'll buy 25% of your company, I'll give you 1 million to do it. It's super hard to do that. I mean, in Europe, it's doable. That's our experience.
Okay. And so about hardware versus software, do you think it's only, of course, you have an hardware idea, an hardware product, so you couldn't do a software product. Do you think there are some opportunities that come really in developing hardware compared to developing a software product?
Yeah, there are quite a lot of opportunities in developing hardware instead of only software. The first is the barriers of entries for your competitor. For example, it's very easy to patent hardware, so something mechanical is very easy to protect. Also, investors see a lot of money in patent from companies, and I mean, for an execution doesn't count as much in software startup, because in software startup you have to be the first at doing something and you have to be the best. In hardware, if you have a great hardware, a great idea, and no one is doing what you're doing, you can, let's say, take your time and go to market as well as possible. But let's say it's more relaxed from the point of view of execution hardware. I think it's that.
Okay. Do you have any other opinion, Stefano, on that?
I totally agree. So the first opportunity that you have when you start building something based on a real product is that when you reach the market, the product will be developed. And in order to reach that point with a slightly different version, any competitor will need to do the same process. It will not be so much easier just because you already have done it. While when suggesting a use case for a software platform, you are also already suggesting a part of the solution. For the hardware product, this is, less than 10%. So this is an advantage, of course.
Okay. And we already talked a bit about the disadvantages that are. Do you think we missed one great disadvantage of an hardware product compared to software, except of more development time, more engineering required?
This is not a disadvantage, but is something that you can do, and you will miss perhaps the point, is trying to do the product without prototyping. So thinking that your idea is the perfect one, and so you jump to developing and trying to sell the product that you have in mind. Just because it's hardware, it doesn't mean that you cannot prototype and do some A/B testing or some proof of concept based on paperwork or Lego work, and try to imagine if this will be really interesting or not. This is the main drawback. Because when you have done it, you need to redo almost everything in order to change something, of course.
Yeah, you're right. When you do something hardware, you have to know the market you are going to attack. So you have to know your clients, so what they need, and you have to get your client to test what you are doing. So when you have a proof of concept, go to your client and test it out. When you have a minimum viable product, go to your client. When you have a beta product, go again and change it 6, 7 times, 10 times before going to market, because when a product, an hardware product is industrialized, it's super difficult to change it. So I mean, do not commit the error of let's say of making a product no one is gonna use. I mean, it's a very some startups failed because of this, or maybe they R&D forever, so they continue to change without going to market. That's another risk in hardware startups.
And you want to add something?
Of course, this is something that you usually do with software. You try to prototype something, you prepare a mock-up, you try to expose yourself in order to understand if this is going to sell, and why not doing it with hardware, which is very difficult to think because you are spending a huge amount of money in this phase compared to what you can do with software. But it is absolutely needed.
And what about the job market? I mean, I know that, for a startup company, it might be harder to find good people in electronics or in engineering. So, what's your approach with what do you think also about the current situation in Italy? There are some shortages that we know also, but what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, we are a growing company, so we are looking for people, and we are especially looking for people with a background in IoT engineering, firmware, and electronics right now, because you can find a lot of mechanics that are willing to work for us, but the electronics are really lacking. So I think the market is very poor of this figure. So having a network that, let's say, gathers people that have a background in firmware, electronics, embedded system is a great plus for the whole industry. And let's say this is our experience. We get a lot of difficulties in hiring people from firmware engineer, and mechanical people are super easy to get.
Difficult question. We hired a lot recently. During the last 2 years, we jumped a little bit on the high side of the hiring, and what we learned is that you need to do some marketing. Of course, you need to expose yourself and try to let people think about how the work will go on in your company and so on and so forth. And successful companies are hiring very curious people, very curious students, professionals, and also very curious people at large. I mean, not only students and not only young people, which is not always needed or always the best option. But you also need to talk a lot with people around you, with groups like this one, and like, groups inside the university, in order to have your idea of whom you will want to cooperate with. And then you will choose the right person. This is very, very difficult. It's not a matter of finding the right people against some fixed rule that you build at the beginning. I want an engineer with this qualification, this degree out of the university, and this experience. You will find plenty of people with totally different skills, but they will be compatible with your mind of developing something new. We ended up recently hiring people from abroad that wanted to live here in Italy, and we ended up hiring people from abroad that wanted to stay abroad, just because it was the right mentality for us, which is not a problem, of course. The difficult part of hiring the right person, of course, it's the availability of engineers, physicists, mathematics, and so on and so forth, but also having the right approach in order to understand if you will want to work with this person or not.
Yeah, so a lot also comes to branding for companies, and it's not...
Branding is really important. Unfortunately, it's very, very important, yes.
And today is not just about big tech companies, but also
small ones,
medium-sized companies need to
yeah,
to
because of course we don't have the name. We have, for instance, I live not far from Padova, so northeast of Italy. We have a fairly big university at Padova with plenty of engineers and people coming out of physics, mathematics, and so on and so forth. And in front of the Department of Engineering, there is the Italian branch of Infineon. Where we live, we have a very interesting university center, but in front of the university, there is a very big corporation hiring almost all engineers. They now employ 400 engineers in front of the university. So this is very difficult. So you need to brand, you need to do some branding, but you need also to convince that even if you're not a big name, you are interesting, which is not so easy, of course.
You're right. The branding also for startups is very important because no one knows you, no one knows your name, so they will go on LinkedIn and see what you are doing, what you are building, how is your office, because startup starts in garages, so where you're going to work, things like that are very important when you are hiring. I mean, we are hiring people that know how to do stuff because we don't have time to teach them, but we are hiring based on mindset, based on not their degree. If you have the right background and if you want to work in a startup environment, you can work with us. I mean, we don't look at degrees, we look at experiences and at mindset. You're very right.
And anyway, there is no rule apart from curiosity. If you are very curious, you will find curious people who want to learn about what you're doing, and everything will work very well.
Okay, so I think we have one last question from our side. Then we will leave some time to questions from people here. And this last question is about what are some resources that you would suggest to read, watch, something that you can learn from if you want to start an hardware business?
Okay, from my from my point of view, is doing something with your hands. Something with your hands. So building with wood, with anything you might come in your mind, and try to understand how it is possible to build something mechanically and physically. It doesn't have to be electronics, of course, but it must be something that you start thinking if it will fail or not. This is, in my opinion, one of the most important points of view that will bring you to understanding how to build something effectively with the right availability. I find it always so curious to learn that people in the engineering, people from the engineering side, is not able to look at something in order to understand why it works or why it doesn't work today. So having the task of building something which is like a desk or a chair or anything like that will teach you to have a point of view of someone that need to make something work. Sounds easy, sounds normal, and absolutely it is not. So this is the first thing from my point of view.
Yeah, from my point of view is, surround you with people with a different background that know completely different things for you, because the people are the first thing in a company, and having a good idea comes from hanging out with the right people and let's say having the greatest team. So if you hang out with let's say people from different backgrounds, so with different ideas, you will come out for sure with something good, and you will have also the competencies to do that, because someone is doing software, someone is doing hardware, someone is doing electronics, someone is doing mechanics, and maybe someone is a management engineer and can do the business model side of things. So This is my advice for a winning startup, let's say, a winning company. Also, having experience it's also very very important. So
Having all business functions on board is very important. So having all those points of view since the beginning, yeah, it's really important. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can close it here, and then we will have a bit of questions from them. But it's easier if we stop recording for the moment. So thank you very much for your contribution. I really think that we got a lot of interesting insights from people in the industry. So just follow their pages on LinkedIn, Agade and Blue Wind. We are Italian Embedded. So really thank you very much for your attention, and hope to see you in
Thank you very much.
event.